Ijumaa moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuart. It's Monday, November 14th. This is Africa 54.
As the COP27 Climate Conference continues in Egypt, African leaders are pushing major nations to focus on the continent's dire needs, as our report from Nairobi details. Just as cold weather hits Europe, Mozambique has announced it's now exporting liquefied natural gas from a massive new field in Cabo Delgado. Last week's U.S. midterm elections maintained Democratic Party control of the Senate, and House races, while favoring the Republicans, still have not been finally determined. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
Monday marked the start of the second half of global climate talks in Egypt. Uncertainty remains over whether there'll be a substantial deal to combat climate change. Tens of thousands of delegates from nearly 200 countries, plus observers, experts, activists, and journalists returned to the conference zone of COP27 in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh after a one-day break.
It is now up to us all here to rise to the occasion and respond to the demands and calls from our communities around the world who will accept no less than meaningful outcomes at COP27. Time is not on our side, and the world is watching. Let us come together and deliver now.
The UN's top climate official appealed for constructive diplomacy to match the high-flying rhetoric heard during the opening days of the talks. For the latest on the UN Climate Conference, I'm joined live via Skype from Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, by VOA's Heather Murdoch. Heather, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Heather, update us on the latest developments from the summit today.
Well, today there was one development that got us a little bit closer to one of the major goals of the climate change conference, which is to fund some of the climate disasters in developing countries through the finances of wealthy countries. This initiative has the support of many Western countries, including Europe, that has already got $200 million pledged to it. This initiative is meant to fund money quickly to climate disasters in the most vulnerable places, which is something that is greatly needed across this globe for a long time. But it also has its critics because it's not nearly enough. Back in 2009, the number that was identified for how much money that was needed for wealthy countries to fund climate disasters in developing countries was $100 billion, a lot more than $200 million. Other critics talk about the issue that this is essentially an insurance scheme, and traditionally the most vulnerable places, the most volatile places, are also the hardest to insure in the long run. Also today on the agenda was water and its impact on the climate, and water, as you know, is part of every single climate change disaster. Always there's either too much water or not enough water. This year alone, there have been floods that have killed more than 2,300 people in Pakistan and Nigeria alone. And also drought that have caused near famine conditions in the Horn of Africa. People in Somalia are already dying because there's simply not enough food because there's not enough water.
Heather, very briefly, we saw some protests on the sidelines of the summit. What were the demands of Egyptian climate activists?
We've seen Egyptian climate activists and activists from all over the world here at this conference, and their demand is simple. They are calling for climate justice. They're saying that human rights and climate change justice are connected, and that the poorest people in the world are not the people that have polluted this world, and they are the people that are suffering the most. And they want the wealthy countries to pay up and to help the people who are already suffering from climate change.
Heather, thanks. Heather Murdoch is VOA's Middle East correspondent. The UN Climate Change Conference is being held at a time when Africa is enduring record drought and famine warnings in the Horn region and other severe weather disasters like floods in West Africa. Climate change activists are asking African leaders to unite in pushing the continent's agenda at COP27. Juma Majanga has more from Nairobi.
Africa produces less than 4% of global emissions, yet still suffers the effects of global warming, including food insecurity, increased conflict, and more severe weather events. These effects can be seen all over the continent.
Just most recently, we've seen the floods in Nigeria that have displaced 1.3 million people. We've seen the floods in Mauritania and in the Horn of Africa, both in Somalia and Kenya, we're seeing devastating droughts that are exacerbating famine in the area. A bit further south in South Africa, we've seen the KZN floods that occurred between April and May of this year. That claimed the lives of 500 people. So these extreme weather events are just going to become more commonplace and more lives will be lost as a result of the climate crisis.
75% of all greenhouse gas emissions are from the G20 nations, and environmental leaders are asking these countries to do more.
And that is the conversation that we need to have at the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, Africa's COP as we call it. They need to lean in, both with money, but also with their own emissions reductions.
According to a recent report by the UN Environment Programme, the international community is still falling far short of the 2015 Paris Agreement goals, with no credible pathway to keep the rise in global temperatures below the key threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Experts say Africa offers a unique opportunity for nature-based solutions to the global crisis.
One of the major solutions to global emissions of carbon dioxide is the capture of carbon dioxide by the natural environment. So Africa has the second largest forest, which is the Congo Basin, and that is a source of really carbon sink that absorbs carbon from the atmosphere and locks it up in trees and vegetation. It also have in places like West Africa, especially Nigeria, the third largest mangroves in the world. And mangroves are also a source of capturing carbon.
As the disasters continue to affect millions, COP27 provides an opportunity for the international community to continue negotiations for global goals that will tackle climate change. Many promises were made at last year's COP26 conference in Glasgow, and now all eyes are on the Sharm el-Sheikh conference to see what solutions will come from the discussions. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Top military commanders from Ethiopia and its embattled Tigray region have agreed to allow unhindered access to the region and form a joint disarmament committee following last week's truce. The commanders, who since Monday have been meeting in Nairobi, signed an agreement on Saturday as they say they call for a disengagement from all forms of military engagements. Both parties agreed to protect civilians and facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid to the region of more than 5 million people, according to a copy of the agreement seen by the Associated Press.
This document, we have made a reference once again to the security of the civilian population, mainly women and children. And in this document also, it has been explicitly laid out that there shall be severe sanction on anyone who will commit atrocities against civilians.
Accordingly, we want to express our full commitment for bringing peace and stability to our people and country. Therefore, we will fully dedicate ourselves to implement the Pretoria Agreement and this declaration.
We have suffered misery over the last 2 years and still continue to suffer. The commitment we are making today is with the hope that expectations that our people's suffering will come to an end and soon.
For more on Ethiopia-Tigray peace talks, I'm joined by Abraham Zere, VOA Tigrinya language team lead. Abraham, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
I know you've been following this story for quite some time. What are the takeaways now from the peace agreement from both sides?
Right now on Saturday on Nairobi, they signed 6 points of agreement that includes permanent cessation of hostilities, disarmament of Tigray combatants, protection of civilians, delivery of humanitarian aid, monetary verification, and the use of media.
And do we have any reaction so far from the Ethiopian government after the TPLF leaders said they might have to make some moves forward depending on whether the Eritrean forces will move out of Tigray?
Right now, today, the commander of the Ethiopian Armed Forces, Birhanu Julla, returned on Ethiopia, Addis, and said we work to implement the deal. Same time, the lead negotiator of Tigray, Getachew Reda, returned back to Mekelle today, and they said it's now time to work on the implementation of the deal.
Are they talking about how fast that these agreements can be implemented for, the region of Tigray and for the entire country of Ethiopia to be able to move forward?
Right now, according to the agreement, they will start the disarmament of Tigray combatants on the 15th. The initial orientation of the armies. But how to go from there, we don't have any updates yet.
And what are Ethiopians saying back home?
Ethiopians, I think they are very happy on both ends. They might have some reservation about how it will be implemented, and there could be also other factors. But overall, they are happy about the peace deal.
We heard that there are reports of, moving aid towards Tigray, towards some parts of Ethiopia that haven't been able to been accessed by humanitarian aid groups. What do you know so far?
Right now, so far, there have been access to 2 regions like Amhara and Afar, but I doubt they reached to Tigray. I mean, those specially controlled by Tigray's army. But there were some aid in those areas controlled by the federal government in Tigray. But maybe they're expecting to either soon to have it delivered in Mekelle, in those controlled by Tigrayan forces.
What are you hearing from the ground as to what civilians really want first? Because there have been so many issues of lack of medicine, food, of course. What is their number one demand?
The first demand is, I think, cessation of hostilities. People are tired of war, and they need to resumption of basic service like food aid, medicine, basic supplies like electricity, banking, and others. These are the demands that you hear always from people in the ground.
We don't hear much about schooling, especially where the war has been, has reached some proportions. What do you know about schools for children?
I think in comparison to the safety of the life, schooling is even secondary at this level. But soon I hope they would start also discussing about such issues like schooling and other resumption of normal life.
Zere, thank you very much for your insight into Ethiopian peace talks, and we hope for peace for Ethiopia. Abraham Zere is VOA's Tigrinya language team lead. The government of Mozambique has revealed that it has begun exporting liquefied natural gas. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
The president of Mozambique, Filipe Nyusi, announced over the weekend that his country was entering a new era as the first shipment of gas produced at an offshore plant managed by the Italian company Eni was departing its territorial waters.
Com elevada honra que anuncio o início da primeira exportação.
It is with great honor that I announce the start of the first export of liquefied natural gas. Produced in Rovuma in Mozambique by the Coral Sung-Fung project. The British sponsorship departs Mozambican waters for the international market.
Mozambique is optimistic about its vast natural resource gas deposits, the largest ever found south of the Sahara. Analysts say that Mozambique could become one of the world's 10 biggest exporters of natural gas.
Today, Mozambique enters the annals of world history as one of the exporting countries of LNG, which, in addition to representing an alternative source of supply, largely contributes to energy security in countries with the highest consumption.
The region has been hard hit by an insurgency waged by Islamic State-linked militants that have cast doubt over the viability of exploration sites and stalled progress. The conflict has killed more than 4,100 people over the past 10 years, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, a non-governmental organization. Hundreds of thousands more have been displaced, according to the United Nations. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping said Monday they are ready to continue candid and in-depth exchange of views and open and honest dialogue. Xi and Biden met ahead of the Group of 20 summit in Bali. It has been over 50 years since China and the U.S. started initial contact and established diplomatic relations. Xi says the current state of China-U.S. relations is what both sides are concerned about. President Biden says the United States and China should work with all countries to bring more hope to world peace, greater confidence in global stability, and a stronger impetus to common development. Senegal's President Macky Sall is expected to meet with the President of China, Xi Jinping, this week on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. Sall is attending the summit as the head of the African Union. The summit opens Tuesday and runs through Wednesday. Sall is expected to discuss the issue of aid for Senegal and other developing nations as they battle climate disasters. A spokesman for South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says his government will push to create a permanent seat at the G20 for the African Union. South Africa is the only G20 member from the African continent. Would like to know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, some midterm races are still too close to call. We'll have a report.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, military sources say government troops and rebels traded heavy fire in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on Monday. Government forces and the M23 militia battled in Kibumba, about 20 kilometers north of Goma in North Kivu province. The family of jailed British-Egyptian activist Alaa Abdel Fattah says he is doing well and is taking liquids after fears rose for his health amid a months-long hunger strike. Zambia's foreign minister says a Zambian student who had been jailed in Russia was killed in fighting in Ukraine. Zambia is demanding an explanation from the Kremlin. The projected red wave of Republicans sweeping to power and controlling both chambers of the U.S. Congress fell flat in the midterm elections. Republicans are edging closer to winning the House of Representatives, but some races remain too close to call. VOA's Arash Sharabasadi has more.
Democrats will retain control of the United States Senate. Despite predictions of losing both the House of Representatives and the upper chamber, President Joe Biden's party exceeded all expectations in this election cycle. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, the first woman from Nevada and first Latina ever elected to the Senate, defeated Republican and former State Attorney General Adam Laxalt in a thin victory. The win ensures Democrats will maintain at least one chamber of Congress in the final 2 years of President Biden's current term. It also means New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer will remain the majority leader. On a trip to Cambodia, Biden wasted no time heaping praise.
Well, I'll tell you what, congratulations to Senator Schumer. He's got a majority again, and we're focusing now on Georgia. We feel good about where we are. And I know I'm a cockeyed optimist. I understand that from the beginning, but I'm not surprised by the turnout. I'm incredibly pleased by the turnout. And I think it's a reflection of the quality of our candidates.
Candidate quality has been a recurring theme in this election, with Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell having previously criticized his own party's candidates, with others joining in.
Candidate quality matters. You know, there's a sense of extremism that I think a lot of Republicans were painted with, rightfully or not. As Americans, we got to fix extremism right now, and I think that's exactly what you saw.
Still looming large over the Republican Party, former President Donald Trump's hand-picked candidates didn't fare as well as he'd hoped, like celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, who lost his race in Pennsylvania to Democratic Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, and Blake Masters, who lost his bid against Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly.
I'm so honored that Arizona has entrusted me to represent our state in the United States Senate for 6 more years.
With 50 seats, Democrats effectively control the Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris as Senate President casting tie-breaking votes. Only one state's outcome remains undecided in the Senate race, and that's Georgia. Republican and former football star Herschel Walker and Democratic Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock are headed to a runoff election December 6th. Georgia is one of 2 states requiring that a candidate earn at least 50% of all votes to win. The House of Representatives, meanwhile, remains too close to call, but Republicans do appear likely to reach the 218-seat threshold required to secure a majority.
Whatever the outcome, we're on the path to taking our country to a better place than was being dragged down by the other side.
With the Senate decided, the country may still be weeks away from knowing who controls the House as election workers continue counting ballots. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Several programs in the United States help people with disabilities enter the workforce. VOA reporter Alzuma Compaore has this story of how one man found a job and a sense of self-worth.
My name is Ricardo Bill. My age is 28. I was diagnosed with disability. Some things I couldn't do, like reading and math, stay awake in school. I just didn't like it going to school.
When Ricardo graduated from River Terrace High School in Washington, D.C. in 2016, his teachers reached out to his mother. They wanted Ricardo to enroll in programs of the Developmental Disabilities Administration, or DDA, and Rehabilitation Services Administration, or RSA.
Ms. Boatman was one of his teachers, and she did all the paperwork for him to get a case manager down DDA. So
DDA helps residents with disabilities receive the services and support they need to lead self-determined and valued life in the community. RSA focuses on employment. They both fall under the umbrella of the Washington, D.C. Department on Disability Services.
We have people assigned to all of these schools to identify students with disabilities who may benefit from our services, to provide what we call pre-employment transition services, which are a number of different services to help students prepare for post-secondary success, to help them prepare for either post-secondary education, training, or employment after high school.
DDS helped Ricardo find his way to Galaxy Healthcare Solutions, which helps students with resume writing, interviewing, and job hunting. The help he received changed his life. He now works 2 jobs and could not be happier.
The thing I'm really proud of is making my own money. I don't have to ask for nobody else for nothing else no more. Before I started working, I didn't have anything else to do. I had to stay in the house
It's a program that works for everyone. Ricardo, his mother, and his employers at Mom's Organic Market.
Ricardo does a little bit of everything. You know, he helps customers. He'll do a lot of bagging groceries for customers. He does a lot of cleaning. He's definitely our cleaning guy here because he's so good at it and so thorough and a hard worker.
When I see Ricardo working, it's a good feeling for me because I pushed and pushed and pushed for so hard for him to be able to get employment. That's good for him and for me.
With my 2 jobs, I feel successful and I want the whole world to see I'm doing great. I am happy. My goal is to get my own restaurant. I want this whole thing go viral.
A program that is giving people with disabilities the ability to dream. Arzuma Kampaure for VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Around the world, women and girls are under threat from conflict and repressive regimes, under threat from climate, and under threat from poverty. Risks have gone up, including the threat of kidnapping, torture, killing, and gender-based violence. Women leaders, human rights defenders, activists are particularly targeted by online threats and harassment and abuse. They're often the subject of disinformation campaigns designed to intimidate, discredit, and silence their calls for peace. We must promote women's leadership, whether it's in their villages, it's in their capitals, or it's on the international stage, as we 5 women members of this Security Council here promote, and the many other women we see around this room today. The Women, Peace, and Security Agenda, as outlined by Resolution 1325, offers a transformational vision. A world where women and girls are protected, included, and play an essential role in forging peace.